Tēnā koutou. My name's Alan Riwaka. I work for Te Ohu. I've actually been there for a number of years. I guess the area I work in is in marine and freshwater species, but I also work a lot with our commercial and our non-commercial people, our customary people. And I guess it's interesting for me in the last, probably late last year, I got put on to the Eel Enhancement Company, which is a commercial body which looks after the commercial interests for the North Island. And I guess that move was sort of part and parcel of what was discussed earlier about MPI doing a review. So essentially we wanted to get in there amongst our commercial people, amongst our customary people, to help basically, to move things in the direction that we want to go. So in my presentation, I provide a brief overview of some of the aspirations and issues that were identified by iwi during Te Ohu's recent consultation with iwi on MPI's proposal to review the North Island, and in fact it was actually the Chatham Islands that came up for review as well. I think the South Island fishery was reviewed last year and there were some major things that happened then. So originally we had intended to highlight these matters, these issues and aspirations as part of our response to MPI's sustainability proposals. But because they've decided to review next year, we thought it might be a good idea to actually bring some of these issues and aspirations to the table now so that they can form part of the kōrero that we're having over today and tomorrow. And I think it's important that we throw everything on the table, you know, so that we've got all the information that we possibly could have to actually make some decisions in moving forward. The aspirations provide us with direction and I guess a sense of what iwi value and consider as important. I guess identifying the issues help us to better understand the issues that the environment that we're actually operating in. And I guess it also provides an opportunity for us to make more informed planning to actually occur. But before I get going, I just wanted to again acknowledge, like many of the previous speakers, a lot of the people that have done a lot of the mahi, and in this particular case I'm referring to our iwi, our hapu, that have done a lot of work since, at least since 2006, and in fact I think Bill was talking about he's been at this mahi since about the 60s, so kia ora to you, Bill. You're an inspiration to all of us. So yeah, a lot of work to be done. I guess if I looked at the iwi, the asset holding companies, so we all know what the asset holding companies are. They're essentially the commercial arms that look after our commercial quotas. And I guess the initiatives that they've taken, particularly since 2006, 2007, since the Minister made some major reductions to the commercial catches back in 2007. So they've basically shelved all of their longfin tuna, and I'm actually aware that a number of the iwi have also shelved their shortfin tuna, and that's all part and parcel about trying to rebuild the fishery. I guess if we look at our iwi and hapu, we've heard of a lot of it today. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different ones that are sitting in the room today. I guess Millen Ruka, I don't know, I can't see you out there, but you know, that guy does a lot of mahi out there with our people up in Taitokero and keeping the regional councils accountable, as well as the farmers, and we need to do a lot more of that around the motu. And I'd also like to acknowledge our iwi and hapu for all of the work that they've been doing in actively protecting our tuna stocks in both regional planning and resource consent processes and all those sorts of things. I spent a lot of time during the 80s and 90s working in that space, and it's real hard work. So I take my hat off to all of you. I guess it's also important to acknowledge our Wai Māori people, our directors. Tēnā koe to you, Ken. You know, they've done an awesome amount of work over the last few years in getting in behind a lot of the iwi, the hapu, and many of the projects that we've done, and I tend to think that we probably wouldn't have come the distance if we didn't have that sort of support. I guess we're a decade down the road from where corrective measures were first put in place by the Minister of Fisheries, again back in 2007. It's now time to review progress, to review the latest CPUE data that was stuck up on here by Mark just before, as well as any other information that we have. So we really do need to take stock of where we are now. We're 10 years down the track of when we first reviewed this fishery. We need to have another close look at it to see where we are today, and to also plan for our next steps. I guess my presentation is a pretty simple one. I'm going to do it in 3 parts. The first one will be just to talk briefly about the aspirations that I mentioned earlier. Secondly, I want to talk about the issues that have been raised along the way. Again, it must have been about 4 or 5 months going around the motu, particularly in the North Island, talking to our people. And thirdly, I just want to put up some recommendations that I'd like the conference to actually consider. So if we get into the aspirations, I guess the first one I've got here is about building a vibrant fishery. And I guess the question for me is, so what does that mean? Firstly, it means that we need an abundant fishery. It also means that we need to develop some reference points. Again, Mark talked briefly about the need to measure performance. What I see terribly missing from this is some measures, some formal measures that we can use to know whether or not we're actually progressing. I wouldn't like to think that we haven't gone anywhere in the last 10 years, but we do need to do that sort of mahi. And we also need to figure out, so exactly what does success look like in the future? Where is it that we want to head to? It also means healthy waterways that are supporting healthy tuna stocks. It's also about supporting our iwi customs and traditions associated with our tuna fishery. And I guess a big part of that for me is ensuring that we've got tuna on our tables. And I guess for me, in terms when we think about our customary things, I often think about, so how do we know success? And I guess if we don't have tuna on our table, well then that's a measure of success in itself, or not success. So we need to think about those things. It also means having access to well-stocked rivers, and that our people are actually harvesting the fishery, the tuna fishery. One of the things that I hear from our commercial people and others, I hear it amongst our own people, is that fewer and fewer of our people are catching our tuna. So I start to wonder about whether or not the values that our people hold for tuna are actually starting to change. All of us sitting in the room, it's all well and fine for us to go out there and plot a future, but we need to take the future generations with us. They need to understand why we're doing these things. So we've got a real big challenge ahead of us, I guess. And I guess it also means having enough fish in our rivers, enough tuna in our rivers, so our people can in fact go back and be involved in commercial fishing. The next one I've got here, and again there's been a lot of kōrero about this morning, about managing our tuna fishery and our rivers. Essentially, we want to protect and enhance the mauri associated with tuna and waterways, consistent with our respective tikanga. I think that's pretty clear after listening to speakers today. And I guess the other point for me is that our people seem to have very little confidence in the decision makers that are there today and actually managing the stocks. And I guess the proof of that is when we have a look at the state of the fishery today. My perspective is that it is improving, but it's been in a bad way, and we've got a long way to go yet to perhaps grow it to where we need to be. So what do our people say to me when we're out on the road in terms of our rivers and lakes? The message is that we get back from our iwi is that the iwi say they own the rivers, the waterways, they belongs to them. And again, we've heard this kōrero today. We want to protect the resources, not only the tuna, but also the habitat. And I guess for iwi, managing is sustaining stocks for future generations. And I think it's also about our obligations as Māori to Tangaroa and to our atua, and then again for our future generations. Again, I think there have been some success in terms of our iwi, our hapu, being able to get better management of the fisheries, and I guess we only have to look again to the speakers this morning with the Wanganui River, with what's happening there. But also there's some really good examples with Waikato Tainui. I'm sure our Waikato people could have probably talked about a whole bunch of things that they're involved with that they didn't today. But I'm quite amazed with the amount of progress that they've made. Sort of very mindful of what's happening in the Te Arawa area, and also on the Rangitaiki River. I'd had the opportunity to spend a bit of time with some of our iwi in that area, and there's some massive things that need to happen in there, particularly in terms of the dams, and Bill talked about a lot of that stuff this morning. I guess there's also a number of areas in the North Island that have been closed to commercial fishing way back in around the 2005, 2006. So if we have a look around, we've got the Mohaka, the Motu catchments, they're all close to commercial fishing. Taharoa Lakes, Whakaki, over in Kahungunu, Lake Pokawa, and the Penkaro Lakes. So they're all close to commercial fishing, and as I said, I guess there's go some way to providing the opportunity for managing their fishery. I can't help but feel with some of those things, though, that we should be looking at developing customary regulations that actually give our people the ability to do some of the things that we're actually talking about in terms of managing our taonga. And I guess the other interesting point for me when I think about management, it sort of sits with me in terms of Te Arawa and Tūwharetoa. So if we go back to pre-92 Settlement Act, as I understand it, Te Arawa and Tūwharetoa went to court to try and stop the tuna fishery from entering into the quota management system. And I think back then they had the view that the tuna fishery would be better managed outside the fishery, and I guess they still have that view today. So I guess a big mihi to those iwi. In terms of being involved in research associated with the tuna fishery, I guess when I think about it, it's I think about the amount of interest that our people hold with the tuna fishery. So we've got 100% of the customary. It's actually owned by our own people. If we look at the commercial interests, we've actually got 40% plus of all of the commercial interests. So when we're talking about commercial, a big part of this is we actually need to talk to ourselves. And when I think about this rohe right here, they own the biggest stake in the commercial fishery. So iwi in this area, including Moana, New Zealand, actually own 80% plus of the commercial fishery. So again, we need to have the kōrero with our own people and try and get some greater alignment in terms of where we're going. Just lastly on the research, I guess one of the things that we're going to need to do a lot more work in the future is to actually figure out what's happening in the areas outside the commercially fished areas. So Mark has given a big talk on information relating to CPUE data, catch data, but it doesn't relate to the whole of the quota management area. It only relates to the commercially fished areas. So my bigger concern would be, so what's happening outside of those commercial areas? So we need to do a lot more mahi in that area. And I have to say I was really pleased, I think it was Erica that was up there earlier on, really pleased to have some of our young scientists coming through and being able to have the kōrero. I guess the other one we've got here, the other aspiration is about iwi wanting to protect our water quality and our habitat. And I guess it goes without saying, if we don't have any habitat, then we don't have any tuna. So there's a big thing out there for us to do in terms of building those things. So the other aspiration that I guess we have is in relation to the tuna enhancement and farming programs. We want to continue supporting alva transfers and farming programs, as they're vital to improving the state of the tuna stocks. And, again, there's been some interesting kōrero that's gone down in this part of the world in terms of a lot of the Māori land that our people have, Māori incorporations that own farmlands around this part of the world, and perhaps the opportunity to look at loading some of those ponds that are actually already on those farms with tuna, or even going as far as creating new ponds and new lakes. So those are opportunities that we should think about. And I guess even when I look up in Taitokero, up in Northland, there are just so many ponds around up there. You start to wonder about, can we actually put tuna into these ponds? And those ponds are all over the mutu. We just need to look out for those things. I think it's also fair to say that our iwi are quite comfortable with relocating alvas, but provided they're actually relocated back inside those catchments. So I guess what I hear a lot of is that we don't want our tuna going into someone else's backyard, or we don't want someone else's tuna coming into our backyard for whatever reasons. But those are kōrero that we need to have amongst ourselves. In terms of the creation of jobs for Māori in the industry, iwi members do want to go fishing, and in fact this was a really interesting conversation when we went out there with everybody. There wasn't one hui that we didn't go to where people didn't raise major concerns around the industry, and I think the starting point is we probably need to, we need to stop commercial fishing, and so there's a lot of that kōrero out there. I don't know whether it's true. But again, it's one of those things that we need to be talking about. And the other thing on that, when we're talking about commercial interests, again, iwi actually own the lion's share of all the commercial interests. And I'm just very mindful of our people that have come and gone that actually did all the hard yards to actually secure our treaty settlements. So we shouldn't be in a hurry to dish all of those interests. We need to sit down and kōrero and try and find our way through. And I guess for Te Ohu, we don't really want to see one of them developed at the expense of the other. We actually want to see all of our interests actually developed. I guess another point on that is, again, if I go back to the 60s and 70s, I was brought up in the top of the South Island, but I know a lot of our own people were involved in the commercial fishing, particularly people in my own whānau, uncles and aunties. So again, when I think about our interests, it's trying to think about the whole thing in a more broader sense. Just the final point I want to make on this is that the asset holding companies, again our commercial companies, from all the kōrero that I've had with everybody, they absolutely understand the importance of our tuna for customary fisheries. And so I haven't met any asset holding companies with rubbish that, and in fact what they do is they want to support that. They want to support the building of the fishery, and hopefully we can get a fishery that's big enough one day that some of our people might be able to go fishing. So this one here about working together with communities and stakeholders, there is strong support amongst our iwi for working together as part of a forum to grow tuna fisheries and their habitat, and working with communities and stakeholders. And I guess the opportunity there is for our people to bring the very best of our people, the advocates that we have in our iwi, around the table so that we can begin to have this kōrero and to set a pathway forward. I think the opportunity is also there for a forum to bring together communities and stakeholders to the table so that they can enter the table, join in the conversation. And we also need to think about pulling together and developing and driving a multi-stakeholder strategy to improve the tuna fishery. And as I was saying earlier on, it's not just MPI. MPI can't actually deal with this on their own. We're actually going to need regional councils, MPI, all the iwi, everybody actually driving in the same direction to actually get us to where we need to be. I think the other thing is that's come out of the kōrero is the need to put in place systems and processes that enable the facilitation and coordination of activities and resources associated with growing tuna fishery. And just the last one I've got in here, my last point is around the need to foster relationships with the various stakeholders. Like I said, the industry, we need to even foster relationships with our own iwi. But there's a whole range of different stakeholders out there that we need to bring to the table for completeness so that we might be able to move things forward. Oops. If I just touch on this one here, again, as we know, iwi have got major concerns relating to the sustainability of the tuna stocks. And I guess my perception of it is a big part of that is actually driven by people's own experiences of growing up, maybe in the 60s, 70s, whatever it might be. But we all have experiences of tuna outside our marae and our homes and all those sort of things. And I guess for me, I don't see a lot of that anymore. But nonetheless, the importance of ensuring the sustainability of the tuna fishery is absolutely important. Again, I just have to make the note, have we made enough improvement? How much improvement have we made in the last decade since we last reviewed the fishery? Commercial fishing, again, I said it earlier on that it was probably one of the biggest issues that were raised at all of the hui that we have. And just to give you an idea of some of those issues, so we had commercial fishers fishing in important customary areas. That was a biggie for a lot of our people out there. Is the Eel Enhancement Company the best vehicle for iwi quota owners? So as I said to you earlier on, the Eel Enhancement Company is actually the commercial body that's set up for the North Island to look after the interests of commercial fishers, of which iwi represent about half of the entire fishery. So that's the question, is that the best vehicle for us? The other one is about fishers coming into local areas. So there is our people don't like outsiders coming in and fishing their rivers. They'd much rather have their own people fish the rivers if anybody's going to fish it at all. But again, that's another kōrero. And I guess another issue, I guess, that's been raised along the way, and it's to do with the iwi shelving their quota, is it's just the iwi shelving their quota. And so that's increasingly being raised by our people as needing to sit down and talk about how we deal with those sort of things. And the last one I've got here is just really about, so how do Māori fishers access ACE? As I said, the iwi actually hold the quota, and they want to access it. And of course, that's quite the opposite of what a lot of our people are saying as well. I guess in terms of dealing with all of these sorts of issues, the best place to start is to get us around the table. I think if I can make a couple of comments in relation to fishing areas or commercial fishers fishing in customary areas, if I can call it that. One of the things that we've started to do with the industry is and I'm talking about Te Ohu, is to talk to the industry about the prospect of developing some policies about how we can better manage catch effort. So what I'm talking about is if there are sensitive areas that our iwi are really concerned about, or our hapu are concerned about, then we should talk about that, and if we all agree, then we should move the pressure away from those areas. And I guess already we've started having some kōrero, sort of thinking down in Tairāwhiti, there's some major issues down there with N and all the Tairāwhiti iwi down there. So we've taken the industry to the table to actually start having a kōrero. I guess the same sort of approach has been applied to the rangitaiki with all the iwi that have interest in that whole thing. I guess we're really needing to, again, bring our people around the table. If they've got issues, well then we need to sit down and have a kōrero about those sorts of things. So a lot of mahi going on in those areas, and again, just to manage our commercial interests. I guess the other one I just wanted to make a brief comment on is around the Eel Enhancement Company and whether or not that's the best vehicle for our iwi to be involved with. I guess the simple answer is a good outcome for industry and for everyone is as if we're actually all in the same tent. We don't need to be fragmented. We've got that many issues and problems that are going on out there. I've already talked about how much of an industry stake that we have in this. We're actually better off all in the same camp. Might have jumped. Okay, if we go straight into this habitat protection, I guess we continue to be concerned about dairy and beef farmers that allow their stock to roam free along the banks of rivers and open waterways. And again, I've sort of become more clued into this through doing some mahi with Millen, if Millen is still in here. There are just so many farms out there today that still have no fences put up, and if you look at the waterways that are running beside them, you know there's going to be good tuna grounds are in there, or they used to be. So we need to do more in that space. And I guess while there have been a number of farmers that have fenced off their rivers, there are still a number that need to do that as well. And I guess the other interesting point that's dropped out in this corridor is that a lot of our own iwi own these farms. And so I guess there's some self-reflection that needs to go on in terms of, so what are we going to do to ensure that we're not causing any damage to the tuna fisheries and what have you. Poor water quality, again, it's been raised again quite a few times today. But again, beef and dairy farmers contribute significantly to the problem with higher nitrate levels, and I guess the problem's made even worse when you get this intensification of farming. So there's absolutely something that we need to be doing in that whole area. I've just got a couple more slides I want to go through. Habitat protection enhancement for the anthropogenic causes of mortality. Again, it's been talked about today, the hydro stations and dams. I was thinking the other night with what MPI or the Ministry of Fisheries are wanting all commercial fishermen to wear cameras and all the rest of it, or maybe we should be putting cameras on these hydro dams to actually figure out how many are actually being killed there. And it's the same with the alvas. We should be putting cameras on those things to actually watch them and what's actually going on. But just a thought as we move into the future. I guess the other major problem was touched on today in terms of councils. There's a lot more that we need to do in terms of fixing the problem we have with flood pumps. Somebody talked today about getting the right pump, and that's fantastic. But we've still got a lot of pumps out there that are operating every time there's a flood. And I guess, I've heard people refer to it as the silent killer. And these things have been going on for as long as those pumps have been sitting in those wherever they are. And so we need to do more mahi in that whole area as well. So just to finish off this one here, the consultation, I guess I wanted to keep this constructive. I didn't want to give my MPI people a hard time. But I guess if we're going to move forward into a consultation next year, then the first thing I have to say is that all the iwi need to be consulted, not just some of them. I guess the other thing is that those who have actually got treaty settlements, it's my view that MPI should be knocking on their door, not trying to group them all together. So all of those iwi have settlements with the Crown, so the Crown have obligations back to our iwi to consult with them properly and to take on board all of those things that they have to say around the management of our tuna fishery. So we absolutely got to get this consultation right. I was pleased in listening to how MPI are going to roll out the consultation, and I guess for me it's about doing the pre-work, the preliminary work. So you need to actually get in there, not take a 3-month or a 2-month period. You need to roll with the iwi over the next 12 months as we start to come up with some plans that might actually be then fed into the MPI processes. I guess finally, just to wrap up my presentation, I've got 5 recommendations I'd like to put up. I guess the first one is about establishing a forum to focus and coordinate actions to continue improving the health and well-being of our tuna stocks. So this is essentially working together and about leveraging each other to achieve the common goals that we're after. I guess the second one I've got here is about driving the development of a multi-stakeholder strategy that is aimed at growing tuna stocks and achieving shared aspirations. The third one I've got here is about developing strategic relationships with the tuna industry, Ministry of Primary Industries, regional councils, DOC, and of course DOC have obligations and responsibilities to iwi in terms of the Conservation Act and the National Parks Act. They must give effect to the principles, so we need to be mindful of the responsibilities that the Crown had to iwi. The fourth one I've got here is developing reference points, as I talked about earlier on. We need to know what success looks like. We need to know where we are today and how far we've got to go. And just lastly here, importantly, I think it's essential that that the likes of Māui and Te Ohu Kaimoana are supporting whatever it is that actually goes forward, because in order to make these things work, it's important to have the capacity, some technical expertise, and importantly to have resources. So on that note, ka mahui tēnei wakatawa ki kia koutou, ko ngā ono-onotanga a iwi apu a wānau e wakapaumate ana te onunga o ngā mātua tipuna me o rātou iri wakatipu. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.